Hi everyone, it's Lynn Dion from Pink Whisper Designs. Today we're going to create this cute little shabby chic gift card holder. We're going to be using a brand new die set from Art Impressions and some of their new papers as well. And then we'll also be using some Tim Holtz products, some foundry wax, some distress spritzes, the mica flakes, and some of the distress oxide ink pads. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me show you this brand new flower and bug die set from Art Impressions. This is just so cute. You get the flower, a bee, a ladybug, and that little tag. And then you have all the little pieces you need to build up these little bugs. And then to create our gift card pocket, we're going to use this die set. Now keep in mind this flower and bug set was designed to go onto your gift card pocket set. And this includes some dies to create a bow, a butterfly, and we also have that thank you sentiment. We're going to grab the base to create our gift card pocket. And then for paper, I'm going to the journal cover series from Art Impressions. So these are a little bit larger papers. And this is the Mother's Day cover paper pack. And I thought as soon as I saw those beautiful little pink roses that I would have to do something in the shabby chic design to include that paper. So I'm going to grab a piece of that, and again this is a double-sided paper, so you have that pretty stripe on the back side. And then I'll grab some post-it tape. This is just a temporary tape that's going to hold that down. I'm placing the die on the floral side of the paper. That will be the outside of our pocket. And then I'm going to run that through the Spellbinders Platinum Scout machine. Once I have that die cut, you'll see that it also creates these little score lines. So let's go ahead and fold on those score lines, and we'll just press that out with our bone folder. I'm going to get some nice creases in that. And then we can add some tape to these two tabs on either side. I've got some 1/4 inch double-sided tape. And that will keep this nice and secure because we are going to have a little tag in here as well as our gift card. So I want to make sure it's nice and secure as you're pulling those items in and out of this little pocket. So let's go ahead and fold those tabs in, and then we'll just close this up. So we have this cute little pocket. So let's go ahead and die cut some of these pieces. I die cut all of them so you can see what they look like there. But all I need are the flowers and the stem, and I die cut that flower 2 times. And I die cut everything out of some Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. So I'm going to start inking these. I'm starting with that Spun Sugar Distress Oxide ink, and I'm using a small blending brush, and I'll just add that ink all over each of these flowers. And then to add a little bit of shading, I'm going to switch over to that worn lipstick. And I'm adding that into the center, and then I'm kind of pulling that out towards the edges. And then what I'll do is go back to that Spun Sugar brush that I was using, that blending brush, and we'll just blend these 2 colors together a little bit more. You could certainly die cut these out of some solid cardstock if you prefer, but I kind of wanted to create that shabby chic look, and I wanted to soften those colors a little bit and add some shadowing. When I placed those against the paper, I thought they needed a little bit more of a darker pink to coordinate better, so I grabbed that Picked Raspberry Distress Oxide ink and I added a little bit of that to the center, and now I like that a lot better. Now to color the stem, I've got Lost Shadow and Hickory Smoke. And that kind of will coordinate with the little vines on the roses there. They're kind of a gray color. So I thought I would start off with that lighter color, the Lost Shadow, and add that all over to the stem. And then I'm going to come in with the Hickory Smoke and add a little bit of shadowing. So now you can see those up close. And next, let's go ahead and take that Hickory Smoke, and I'm going to go right around the edges of each of these petals, and I'm really kind of going on one side of the petal and just kind of pulling that in just a little bit. So you can see that there. Let's do that for this second one. And then I'm going to add some of the gray ink, the hickory smoke, around the edges of my gift card pocket. So I'm going to add that ink coming in a little bit, maybe like, about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch around those edges, a little bit more on the corners. And then I flipped it over and did the back side the exact same way. Next, let's take a look at the Sizzix Thinlits die set from Holtz, and this is called the Vault Boutique die set. Now it has that cute little rose too. All of those little pieces would be great for a shabby chic card. I grabbed this little doily and I placed it on I die cut it, and then I placed it on my sculpting mat. And with my Spellbinder's tool-in-one, you can see how easy it is to pop out those little pieces. That little sculpting mat just makes it easier to push down and pop those out. So I die cut that from a 65-pound weight white cardstock, just because I want it to be able to curl it up a little bit on my tag or on my pocket. So I wanted a little bit lighter weight paper. Now I'm going to take the Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink and a small blending brush, and I'm going to go around the edges of this just to age it a little bit, give it more of that vintage look that we're going for. Once I did that, I decided to add a little bit of that vintage photo around the edges of my pocket, again on both sides, and then to my flowers and stem as well. So that will again give it more of that aged look. Let's go ahead and do the flowers. To do the flowers, I picked them up and I kind of added it right around the edges of the petals. And then I laid that flower back down on the table and just blended that in just a little bit. And I also added some to that stem. Let's do the second flower the exact same way. So let me give you a closer look at how those look. Again, we're just going for an aged look. So I do want to add a little bit more of that vintage look to all of these pieces. So the next thing we're going to do is grab the Holtz Distress Spritz. And again, we're going to use Vintage Photo. Now you do want to make sure you shake this up really well. You don't want anything down at the bottom there. You want to make sure that you shake it until it's mixed really well. And then we're going to, rather than spritz it from the nozzle, I'm just going to take that nozzle right out of the container and spatter it on. And this will give a nice shimmer to all of these pieces. When it dries, it has a little bit of a shimmer to it. So it's really pretty. And then I will flip that gift card pocket over and do the back side the same way. You do want to give this some time to dry, or you can use your heat tool if you prefer. I've got some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I'm going to add it all around the back of this doily. And then I'm going to glue it kind of in that lower right-hand corner. And again, I don't want to glue down the edges. I'm going to curl those up with my fingers just to give those a little bit more dimension and to give it a little bit more of an aged look. And then with my Holtz titanium shears, I'm going to cut away that excess, but I'm going to save that. Here I was going to just fold this around to the back, but I did decide to cut it off and then place those two pieces on the back side, just to finish off the back of this little pocket. So I'll add a little bit more glue just to make sure I glue these down nicely. And again, that will give a really pretty look to the back of this, because I'm not going to attach this to a card. If you were going to do that, then don't worry about the back, but I'm going to use this just the way it is. Again, I'm just curling up those ends. And now for the flowers and the stem, I'm going to just use my fingers to curl up the little petals. And I'll just put glue down the center of this because I do want it to hang off the side a little bit. Let's go ahead and curl these little petals up. And then we're going to lay that second flower right over top of this one. That'll just give it a little bit more dimension, a little bit more interest. But I am going to pop this one up. I've got some small foam squares from scrapbook.com, and I'll just place 3 of those right on the center. And then we can remove the backing and place this right on top of that other flower. And I'm going to offset it a little bit. Now I wanted to add a button to this, again adding to that shabby chic look. So I've got some hemp trimmings from Lawn Fawn, and this one is called Dusty Rose, and I love this one. If you watch my videos, you know that I use this one a lot because it's just so pretty. It's just very soft. So I'm just threading it through this little button just to finish off the center of the button, just to look like it's sewn onto our project. And then once I have that looped through, I'm just going to tie a knot on the back, and I'll cut away any excess. And then this will get popped up on the center of our flower. To pop that up, I'm going back to those same foam squares, and I'm just going to cut them in half so that I can place them all around this button, because we do have that little knot there, so I kind of want to pop this up so it'll sit nicely on the card. And then again, we can remove that backing. We're going to be adding some foundry wax in the gilded color onto the center of this flower. And wait till you see how this looks. It's just so fun. So there's the Distress Foundry Wax. You do want to make sure you shake that up really well. And this one is called Gilded. And what I'm going to do is just squeeze a little bit onto my glass media mat, and I'm going to use my finger, pick that up, and just tap it on. Now that wax will dry fairly quickly on your glass media mat. So I'm working in little small areas. So once you place that onto your project, you do have to heat set it. It will not dry or stay permanently on your card unless you heat set it. And by heat setting it, you activate that really pretty metallic look. So again, I'm just going to pat on some of that around the bottom and then heat set that. And you can see how it's getting that beautiful shine to it. Now you see how quickly it dried, almost to like a powder. So you do want to just work in little small areas, or at least that's the way I like to do it. And then I heat set that small area, and then I move on. I'm going to go around the edges of this little pocket. Again, this gilding will give it a really vintage look, but also add a little bit of shine to it, a little bit of glimmer to the edges as well. So here's a closer look at what that foundry wax looks like, and you can see how beautiful that is. And then I'll flip this over and do the same thing on the back side. And next I wanted to add a little text. Now you may have stamps with text on it that you love. Grab one of those. I'm using the VersaFine Clair Sand Dune ink pad to ink this up. So I'm just inking up the text area. The stamp I'm using is from the Butterfly with Text stamp set from Stampers Anonymous. And I will list and link all of these products down below for you. And you can either take that stamp directly to the cardstock, or in this case, I've just placed it on my glass media mat, and I'm just going to ink it up and then press my gift card holder right down into that text. So that's going to give us a really subtle text, and also, again, adds to that vintage look. Now I wanted to add some more sparkles, so I've got the Tim Holtz Distress Mica Flakes. And I've got some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I'm just going to tap that on with my finger, just kind of randomly placing some of that glue around the edges. And then I'm going to sprinkle on these mica flakes. So I'm just adding them along that glue, and then I'll press it down and tap away any excess. And I don't want a lot of it hanging over the edge, so I'm just going to kind of tap off any of those excess pieces. And then I'll continue going around the rest of this little pocket, adding some more of those mica flakes. And this is going to add a little bit of sparkle. It's just so pretty. It's going to give it a more delicate look. So let's take a closer look at those mica flakes. And at this point, I did decide I wanted a few right around that button. I just thought it would soften this flower a little bit, again, adding a little bit of sparkle. So I added just some little dots of the Nouveau glue around that, right around that button, and then I added some more flakes and I just tapped away any excess. Now I've got that same twine that we used before, that dusty rose twine. I wrapped it around 3 times. I'm using my little scrapbook.com reverse tweezers to hold that in place while I tie a pretty bow. And then I did want this to be adhered to the gift card pocket because we are going to be sliding that tag in and out. I don't want this to get moved around too much, so I'm adding a little dot of glue. I'll go back to those reverse tweezers and just clamp that down until it's dry. Now I've got a gift card, and what I did was I just traced it onto some of this cardstock and I cut that out so it's the exact same size as a gift card. And I went back to my Hickory Smoke ink around the edges, and then I went back to the vintage photo ink and went around the edges with that as well. Back to this same stamp, I'm going to add some of that text to this little pocket for the inside of our gift card holder. So again, I'm just pressing that right down into that ink. And then I'm going back and spattering again with that Distress Spritz. I certainly could have done this all at one time, but I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted this little tag to look like. And I just decided to make it the exact size as my gift card. So now you can see that you have a place on the back to place your sentiment or write a little note. And then I've got my gift card in there with my little tag, and they fit in there perfectly. So let's add a little tag to the front of this, and this comes from that same Flower and Bugs die set. I went ahead and die cut that from some Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock, and then I'll take that spun sugar again and go all the way around the edges. And then I'm going to take that worn lipstick and add a little bit of that color, not coming in quite as far with this one. And then I'm going to take that picked raspberry, and with a small brush, I'm just going to add a little bit right to the edges. Let's go ahead and add some vintage photo. Again, we want to keep this all kind of consistent with that vintage look. So we're just going to age this just a little bit. And now we can add it to the front of this little tag. So I'm going to add a sentiment to this. I've placed it in my Mini Misty stamp positioner. I'm just using a little bit of that Tombow mono double-sided tape, and I'm placing it down just to hold it there. And I'm using the Friend sentiment set from Art Impressions. I'm going to grab that sentiment that says live life in full bloom, but almost any of these would be really great. A lot of them are small enough to fit right onto this little tag. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp that. I'm going back to that same Sand Dune ink, and I will stamp it 3 times. It's a very light ink, so I like to do light stamping with my sentiments, so I just press lightly and then I stamp it a few more times just to make sure the lettering is nice and crisp. I don't want to press down too hard. And then let's go back to those mica flakes and add a few on either side of this little tag. Again, just tying everything together. So once those were dry, I can go ahead and add this. Oh, let's also add a little bit of the Distress Spritz. And I don't want to spatter it on because I don't want to cover those words or that sentiment. So I'm just going to take the nozzle and just kind of dab a few of those onto the front of that tag. That way I have some control over where those are going. And then I can go ahead and glue this. I'm gluing it on a little bit of an angle. And then I'm going to add one of these really pretty gems to the front of this. And I'm also going to add some of those gems to our gift card pocket. And these gems are from Pinkfresh Studio. These are the metallic pearls in the matte gold. And again, all of these products will be listed and linked down below for you, as well as on my blog. So let's add a few of these, and again, this just gives it that shabby chic, vintage look. These little gems are not too shiny, they're just right for this kind of a project. Let's add one more. And then I've got the Doc P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White Ink. I placed some on my glass medium mat. I spritzed that with a little bit of water from my distress sprayer, and with a small paintbrush, I'm going to spatter these two with this white ink, and you'll see how this really makes everything pop. I did grab a little scrap of paper towel and covered my sentiment. Again, I didn't want that to get covered with that white ink. So now you can see how the gift card and the little tag fit perfectly in this little pocket. So let me give you a closer look at the finished pocket and tag. And I really hope you got inspired to give this shabby chic look a try. It's really fun and so pretty and feminine. If you did enjoy today's video, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really do appreciate it, and I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.